All right, I'd like to call to order the September 16th Environmental Matters Committee meeting. And for the record, both members are present, Alderman Arnett and Alderwoman Tierney. And first of all, can I get any motion regarding the agenda? No changes? Can somebody move approval?
Oh, wait a minute. One thing, I emailed you, and I probably should have told Takia to put it on as an attachment, but when we get to that ordinance that talks about the 2 parcels of land, yeah. I have the photograph. It's kind of helpful. And so you can check your email and it will be on that.
Okay. And I did extend an invitation to Mr. Evans to join us. I think he's listening in now. And Mr. Evans, when we get to that point, we'll bring you forward. Okay. So regarding the agenda itself, I know at one point, Alderman Arnett, you wanted to have a discussion about South Annapolis Yacht Center, but it sounds like that may have been taken care of.
It's in process. We're having staff level meetings. Help me, Dr. Nash. We just had one. Is it yesterday? I can't remember. Things are flying so fast, but yeah.
I think that was yesterday. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, the issue is gated communities. I'm more than happy to talk about it at this meeting, but I think we have an ongoing process internally with the city manager and the planning and zoning director to try to
did he freeze? Ross, I don't know if you can hear us, but I think you've frozen. Okay. All right. Well, there aren't any, I guess, Ellie, there aren't really any changes, I think, to make to the agenda. I guess with the South Annapolis Yacht Center, I don't, unless Ross really wants to talk about it, it sounds like they're working on it. I don't know if we need to bring it up here. I was hoping to have, yes, Ms. Green?
If he does want to bring it up, even if you don't vote to add it to the agenda, he can always talk about it under general discussion.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Googling, was it kryptonite in Star Wars where Harrison Ford was frozen? Sorry.
Carbonite.
Carbonite. Ross is in carbonite.
All right, so, I mean, the only other 2 things I think on the agenda, which I think there was just some miscommunication. I didn't follow up with the city manager, but I was hoping to get a conversation about an update from Public Works regarding the stormwater program, and in particular the Green Vest contract and how we're doing with achieving, meeting our water quality targets. And I'm not sure if there's the city manager. I'm not sure if that's something we're ready to have today or not. But
I asked them to join the meeting and to be prepared to provide that.
Oh, good. Okay.
Mr. Johnson is on as well.
Okay, great. So we will add that. We'll need to add that to the agenda, or we can just put it under general discussion. And then the other thing, city manager, was just a quick update on the resiliency plan. I think you said you had a short update for that last time we spoke. So that was it. I guess we'll just add that to the general discussion. And from there, Alderwoman, maybe we can get started with some of these approvals before Ross joins us again, such as the agenda. Well, first, the agenda and then the minutes.
Sure. Well, I motion that we approve the agenda.
Okay, I'll second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. And we also have minutes to approve from July 15th.
Mm-hmm. I motion that the minutes from July 15th are approved.
I'll second that motion. Thank you, Ms. Green.
Thank you, Takia.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right. And let's see. Appointments. Is Ms. Ogburn here?
No, Hillary is here in her place.
Okay.
It's a
Well,
reappointment.
Hillary, we'll turn the floor over to you if you have anything you'd like to say about this reappointment.
Excellent. Ms. Ogburn has served since 2015. She is a resident of Ward 8, and she currently serves as chair to this commission. I have attended their meetings, and she does an excellent job as chair, keeping everybody on track and keeping the agenda moving along. She was recommended by staff as well as very complimentary comments from her fellow members on the board. She has an excellent resume for the position. She has a master's in environmental management. She's LEED certified, and she's worked in a number of different environmental positions as an educator, program manager, as well as a consultant.
Great. Any discussion? Anything, Alderwoman Tierney?
Let's not touch a good thing. It's a very impressive candidate, or I know it's a reappointment, but yeah, very fortunate to have her.
Yeah, I think she's been doing great work on the board, and I don't know if Hillary, you or Takia, but if one of you would be willing to extend an invitation to her to come to one of our meetings if she's able. I would like to get an update from the Conservancy Board at some point. Doesn't have to be anytime soon, but would like to get that on our list whenever she's able.
Just let me know which meeting you want, and I'll send it to her.
Okay. And any motions for this appointment?
I motion that we recommend approval to the Conservancy Board.
I'll second that motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 I can't blame it on medication. Sorry.
All right. We could start with the jump into the next item, which is ID 242-20, development update from Dr. Nash. And Ms. Green, any update from Ross? Doesn't look like it, huh? Okay. Oh yeah.
Should I go ahead?
Yeah, you can go ahead, Sally. That's fine.
Okay. I can always talk to Alderman Arnett if he has any questions. All right. So for August, we had some approvals come in from the Board of Appeals for the changes at 110 Compromise. So we're hoping to get a restaurant here soon. We also had our final building and site inspections for 285 West Street. Those are the 18 new townhomes. So those look really nice. 424 4th Street in Eastport, they revised their site design because they didn't get all their approvals they wanted from Board of Appeals. So they had to revise their site design to come into conformance with what they did get approved. And so that revision has been approved. And let's see, Central Park, which was going to be a townhome development off Hilltop near the rec center, more or less, they've decided to withdraw their application. So,
really? Wow. Do you know what caused that? The market or economy, or?
I assume so, but I don't know. It was the first time any of us remember someone getting approval from the Planning Commission and then withdrawing. So I don't know why.
Did the Planning Commission have a lot of conditions or comments?
They had some. I don't know if that was the deal breaker or not. I just don't know. Thomas Woods is off the site off Forest Drive near Tom Court. And that was going to be townhomes. Then it was going to be a kiddie academy, but they just couldn't quite get the kiddie academy to work for that site. So they backed out and actually are looking at a spot on West Street, which I think will be much better, more well suited for them. And meanwhile, the Thomas Woods owner is going to go ahead with the townhomes. I think he's going to revise the 10 townhomes maybe down to 9 and make them lower. So he's going to make some adjustments that he would need to do with minor modification. Newtown 20, we've issued the demo permit. We're still
sorry, I just unmuted. What price range are those townhomes, or are they just market price? Or
I don't know. I don't think that they'll be too expensive because he is making them less high and he's doing a few tweaks like that.
Yeah, and it's not enough. It's not enough for MPDU applications. So, right.
Well, it is for if it's 10, but that's actually part of the reason he wants to go to 9 because he can't quite make the numbers work if one of the units is an MPDU.
Wow.
Yeah.
On that crappy piece of land. Sorry. Doesn't it have a big incline? Am I in the right place? Doesn't it slope down, or it's difficult? The main challenge with that site, there is some topography that's challenging, but the main challenge is the access because you can't have, it's right turn in, right turn out only. And it's just, it's not great, but it'd just be nice if they could work something out, and hopefully they still can with their neighbors who front on Bay Ridge. So there's a parking lot there. It'd be nice if they could connect to that somehow. Park Place Hotel was approved by Planning Commission. And so I assume they're working on their building permits. Oh, I was at that meeting, and Rob, I'm kind of subjective here, but for a development and impact, not impact fees, but what they have provided outside of the limits of the property is quite good. I mean, they're creating they're across the street and extending a bike path. They're one of the conditions is that they add an easement for future bike path. I know there's some dispute about whether it was renovation work or new construction on the stormwater, but they really made a really good site plan, and I just think it's a good project. So they had changed site engineers and not site work engineers and
architects.
And she did a great design.
Yeah, it was much improved.
From the first
thought.
Yeah,
where it was just kind of looked like a generic, Fairfield Inn kind of building. And, So
is that in Ward 1?
It's not.
It's Ward 2.
No, I just look at it from Park Place. I look at its roof, but
it's Ward 1 adjacent.
Yeah, right there. Yeah, it's Fred's neighborhood that they were. That was the other good thing. The reach out to the neighborhood was just excellent. It's just it came full circle.
Okay. It was one of the first projects we had where we used our new APF procedures and standards, and I thought that worked really well as far as getting the kind of amenities we were looking for out of the developer, much to the developer's dismay. but we did it, so it's good.
Well, thank you. And is the lot across from the police station there, along that old railroad?
Yeah, diagonally, yeah.
Yeah, and it looks pretty promising that we're going to be able to work with the Graduate to get that last piece near there at the end of their access road and be able to do a little mini roundabout there. So that will be good news for everyone involved.
Oh, good. Very good.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Rocky Gorge, I'm sorry, Rob, I know you wanted a timeline. I feel like I've got 98% of the way there. There's just one thing I need to make sure we're all on the same page about the new grading permits and what that means for the new forest conservation law. And I just want to check with Matt. He's not readily available right now, but I'll let you know as soon as I get that all sorted out, make sure we're all on the same page.
Okay. Yeah, it's fine. I saw John Manassas' email and yours, and I think that helped clear it up, because it sounds like the two older permits have expired and they didn't make a request to renew them, but it sounds like they're going forward with just the new one. I don't have the number. I don't see the number on here, but I think John said there was some new
yeah, I'll
GRD.
add that.
Is that right?
20 something. Yep, they're going to go forward with that one. So I just want clarification with Matt on what does that mean as far as their previous approvals? Are those gone, or because he worked with them on getting them to combine the phases into one grading permit? So I want to make sure I know what his conversations with them were.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's good. I mean, my concern was just some of these old permits that were lingering around, and but it sounds like that's not an issue anymore. So, but yeah, it's a good question about the FCA approval and the stormwater. If it's a new grading permit, what happens with the forest conservation approvals that went along with it?
Exactly. That is the question. So South Annapolis Yacht Center, we are working with them on a few different things, but the main thing is the fence. They've put up a very suspiciously nice construction fence, and so we're working with them. It seems like they want that to be permanent, so we're telling them they need to come and apply if that is the case.
They haven't even applied for it? I thought they were going to apply for it.
They are going to shortly. It's what I understand. We don't have the application in yet, but I understand that it will be in the next couple of days. And then Villages at Providence Point, still working on it. Tom Smith did some field work for the FCP. He's working on his environmental comments this week. I'm starting to work on APF comments. Oh, I think Alderman Arnett is back.
Hello.
And we met this week with Tom and Kwaku, and I met with the county engineer this week to talk about some of the improvements that are going to be required on county roads, and just make sure we're all coordinated on that and how to address those issues. So I feel pretty good about that. So it's coming along. We still have a long way to go in our review process, but I feel like they've come a long way, and it's looking more promising than ever before. So that's my report. Alderman Arnett, you missed my report, but I'm happy to answer any questions now or later if you have any on the Development Review monthly report.
I did look at it, and nothing popped up. Did you bring up anything of import to the rest of the members of the committee? Were there questions, Rob or Ellie?
No, I just have one now.
Go ahead, Alderman.
All right.
This is just my hard-nosed construction background on the fence. Do they get cited for that, for actually building something against the permitted drawings, or is it just a warning, or how does that work?
It's tricky because there isn't anything that says you can't have a very lovely construction fence. However, I think it's pretty obvious, like no one's going to put up a construction fence that nice. So we did immediately have some email exchanges with the owner, and he represented that he he was planning to apply to make it permanent. And so I know Tom Smith's been working with his landscape architect on explaining how to apply, because it's not just a building permit, it's more complicated than that. And then so as of yesterday or maybe the day before, I know their application will be in the next couple of days.
Okay. I'd cite them.
Yeah.
Well, nothing really that they've,
I know. I just hate when they think that we're stupid, and that's annoying. So.
Well, and they get away with it all the time. So it's just frustrating. But I understand Dr. Nash's point. We've got to fix the code to help them. And that's one of the things we talked about at the meeting we had with the Civic Association. And Rob, I've spoken with you about it. Council, first of all, has to come up with a general policy about gated communities. And then I had some very delightful conversations with the city attorney, and he has had that with Dr. Nash and Tom Smith as well, where the other communities have banned gated communities, and they've actually retroactively gone out and taken gates and fences down. And I think it'll be up to the council what taste we have for how much of it, but we've got to untie the staff's hands. Tom brought up another thing that I want to mention in passing, and that's this whole thing in the code about deemed conforming, which is another thing that ties his hands and things. One of the pleas I made to the staff with the city attorney there, because we have to be careful about the relationship, but the staff knows what's causing them problems in processing things and getting successful outcomes. And I keep urging that they work with us, tell us what they need us to do. I mean, it's a partnership, and we should really be working hand in glove to get better outcomes and make their life easier. And deemed conforming has been on my radar for a long time, and Tom mentioned it in passing, but some of these other issues, some of them, you can't write code that's going to address every single possible issue. It would be 10, 20 times, 100 times bigger than it is now, which is already quite big. But some of these things, we really do have to have a better partnership. Another example I gave was Kevin Scott has been doing really good work on revising or looking at revisions for Title 15, which is the harbor lines, which actually came up last night at the Port Wardens tangentially. And I keep saying, Kevin, when you're ready, I'll be sponsor for that. And of course, because planning and zoning has so much leisure time, they haven't been able to get to that. But we don't really have a harbor line right now. It's not updated. We're all at the verge of doing that with the aerial photographs and the GIS mapping by Sean Wampler. And so all of these are things that really need to be worked through, and we have to be a partnership is, I guess, my bottom line, and help on these things. So Sally's hands on this gate with the coyness of the developer are tied, but we need to make sure that we're making a general policy statement that we don't want yet another gated community, if that's the unanimous will of the council.
Yeah, I'd be happy to work with you on any of those for sure. So a few things that notable things that you missed, Alderman Arnett, just to give on this development update would be, let's see, Central Park project. That's the applicant received approval from the Planning Commission, but then withdrew the application. So we don't really know why. The Kitty Academy has withdrawn their proposal, but I think it's going to be, Dr. Nash said it's going to be townhomes like the original proposal. It's about 9 of them, I think, to get under the MPDU requirement. what else? Park Place Hotel's moving along and has been improved. And Rocky Gorge, it sounds like their two old grading permits have expired, so they've applied for a new one. But Dr. Nash is going to look into if their forest conservation approval is still valid or not, because that's probably getting
ask about that.
Getting old at this point as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's about it. So did you have anything else before we move on?
No, but I'm glad you took up Rocky Gorge because that's getting pretty old. And, that one has the community controversy also because of not being able to have access to Ayers T. Allen, which I totally agree, and the community not wanting all that traffic going through the community. And there's huge environmental aspects. There are other ways to relieve Rocky Gorge, but they impact trees and gorges. So that's a tough one.
Yeah, and for the committee's information, some legislation I'm contemplating at some point is setting some kind of cutoff for grading, for not just grading permits perhaps, but just permit extensions themselves, maybe limit the number of them or to a certain number of years, because it seems like in some cases it can go on pretty far. There was something else, but yes, that's the first thing I was looking at. But if I want to develop something, I'll reach out to you, Dr. Nash, and staff to talk about that from Public Works. So with that, I guess we can move on. We did, while you were gone, approve reappointment of Ms. Ogburn to the Conservancy Board.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And so the next piece of legislation, we get into some legislative action.
Just quickly want to mention that Dr. Nash does not have Carolina Blue on.
Sorry, no. I don't, do I? I'm not a very good Tar Heel. I'm a much better Longhorn.
Allie, how many hurricane jokes have you gotten?
Just from my husband, really. So that's it. He's like, "Oh, Sally looks bad."
Sally's ripping through.
Yeah, I feel kind of guilty. Sorry, Alabama. Yeah.
But not that sorry.
All right. So the first legislation, we've three pieces of legislation. Two of them are related. So the first one's O2120, and I guess we'll just take them both at once, and O2220, which both have to do with conveyance of city-owned property in Cathedral Street. And just to give a quick overview of this one, Julian, could you bring up that one image of the site plan that's highlighted? And we do have Mr. Evans on the line, and I'll turn it over to you here shortly. I just wanted to give a brief overview to folks. And I'm sure he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but the proposal is to the south of this area, which I'll show you with the next image, is the Larkin parking lot, city parking lot. And that's those two green X's at the bottom there are two city lots that we would lose, although we would get reimbursed for them. I believe it's said on an annual basis, we would get money to make up for those lost spots. But the proposal in this legislation is to, the first one is to, so you'll see the yellow highlighted area, that's the city property. And so one of the pieces of legislation deals with that thin parcel on the left, which is city, and then the one on the right is another piece of legislation, that's the larger piece of city property. And so the proposal would be they would lease those, will pay for those two lost green spots, and the owners would like to build 4 parking spots there where the yellow into the white on the left are. And so they would have to access through the green X's through the Larkin lot to access these proposed private parking pads. I guess they would give the city the appraised value that's written there. So I think that's it in a nutshell. Mr. Evans, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add to this that I may have missed. And I guess, Julian, could you bring up the other picture too, showing the actual
I was
aerial?
muted. I think I was muted.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I think I was muted.
But we can hear you now.
I just want to thank you all. Thanks for having me. I mean, I just have watched some of the YouTube online hearings, and I just want to make sure if you don't approve it, at least you have all the information. So it's just frustrating that you can't attend hearings. I don't know if I can say a few words. I don't want to take up too much of your time, or I can answer questions. I would say if you give me just a few seconds.
Yeah, please.
I bought this Thank you. I bought this property from Merle Maffey back in, I think, October of 2019. So I've been here almost a year now. When I bought it, Merle he owned this building for 33
Wait a minute,
years.
I'm sorry. Are you talking about, are you talking about both parcels or just one of the two?
No, I just own the one on the right, the one that is actually the larger, we purchased the larger yellow piece. That's 115 Cathedral. I'm sorry, 113 Cathedral. I'm confusing myself. 113 Cathedral is I'm the owner of that building. Mm-hmm. 115 has a 2-foot wide slice of city land between it and its back property. But Mr. Maffey had started on this project back in 2016, and he had met with Tom Smith at the City Planning and Zoning Department. At that time, he was working with Gary Elson and the city chief engineer, Sam Bryce. And so he also met with Alderperson Budge, who was the Ward 1 alderperson at that time. And they developed this site plan. So this site plan was actually approved, not by the council, of course, but by the city personnel. There was a lot of back and forth. And at that time, it was contemplated, probably by Mr. Maffey, that he would get an easement over that property and not purchase it. But so over the years, they went back and forth on this plan. And I think at one point he met actually in March of 2017 with Mr. Bryce, Mr. Gutwald, Ms. Rouse, and went over this. And as things changed, city officials changed, and Alderperson Tierney was elected. And of course, she hadn't approved of any of this and didn't know of any of this. And wasn't involved. So I'm actually reading from a letter Mr. Maffey wrote to Alderperson Tierney back in July of 2018. And I'm sure she doesn't, remember this. She probably gets a lot of correspondence, but he was sort of getting her up to date on the process. And I think he says in this letter that Ms. Tierney, Alderperson Tierney, did not want, and if I say anything wrong, I'm not trying to put words in anyone's mouth, I'm reading from a letter, but that an easement was not the preferred way to go, and that if it was going to be pursued, that it would be a purchase. I don't know if that's true or not. It's what Mr. Maffey said. So I'm not trying to put words in. No,
that doesn't sound like me. I wouldn't know. Okay. I wouldn't know what I was talking about.
Again, that's why I didn't want to say. Oh, okay. I don't want to say that you actually, that was your position, but that's what Mr. Maffey.
Yeah, no, I told him that I wasn't, I hesitated to be a legal advocate and to confer with his attorneys and, present it that way. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I bought the building, Mr. Elson was still working for the city as an assistant city attorney, and I know him just because I'm a real estate attorney in town. And I'm actually on the building board of appeals for the city as well. So I know him, and I called and said, is this something you still think could get done now that I've bought the building? And he said, yes, but you need to get an appraisal. And the appraisal of the land was going to be quite expensive. And Merle just stopped and decided he wasn't going to put the money in to get the appraisal. So I found an appraiser at rate that was less than the one that Merle was going to use, and got the appraisal done. I sent it to Mr. Elson and found out he no longer worked for the city. So I forwarded it to the current city attorney, and he advised me to send it to Mr. Jarrell, which I did. And then all of a sudden there was a bill, and I didn't even know there was a bill put in, except I did look at the website. So I just wanted to make sure if there are any questions. The only other thing I would mention is, and I did put it in the memo I sent, I'm looking out my back side window here at the Larkin Street lot, and I'm happy to rent spaces. There's always empty spaces, but I'm told that there's no monthly parking passes available, and that Larkin lot is only during the weekdays open to to monthly parking. It is not open to hourly or anything. I believe there's a long wait list, according to, and I also sent that I think a lot of the local lots don't have monthly passes. So, I just took up the mantle from Mr. Maffei and thought if it was, he had already paid for the site plan, it was 90% there. We just really needed the appraisal. And, now there's some concerns raised by you all. And if there's a way that I could make it acceptable, I'd like to do it. I mean, we move our cars. We're on Dean Street. We move them. There's nowhere to park. So that is where I am. I just wanted to be able to answer any questions. I will say one thing that I don't know if you can hear my computer talking to me. The building at 121 Cathedral also accesses its backyard and parks on its yard through Larkin Street. And I didn't really realize that, but if you walk into the Larkin Street lot, you'll see a building at the back of 121 Cathedral, and it has its own parking. So it's a similar, actually, you can see it in the picture. That's up right now. It's the building to the left, and you can see there's like sort of I wish I could point it out, but it's the building directly to the left of 115 Cathedral, right there. That parking directly behind it is their private parking. And you can see they access it right there. Yeah, that's their parking. And they access it through the Larkin Street lot. So it wouldn't be dissimilar to that, although they don't rent any spaces, I don't believe. I don't know what their deal is with the city.
So that spot to the right, where the cursor is, that's the parking spot?
No, over all behind the building. You can see there's like an L-shaped thing. It's all in there. Yeah.
Oh, those are private lots.
Yes. But you access it through the Larkin Street lot. They have to enter the Larkin Street lot to get to that.
How do their clients enter through?
I honestly have never spoken to them. I don't know if it's clients or if it's just their employees have I don't know how that works. I've never spoken to them.
Do you know what you would do?
Well, that part I don't know had been worked out with the city. I guess we would have a monthly pass. We would have a monthly pass.
So I'm sorry to interrupt. Are they designated? Is this just a diagrammatic of the two spots in the Larkin lot, and they're subject to be anywhere, or are they designated spots, or you just have a monthly pass?
They would have to be designated spots to enter onto our land, and
so you are showing them correctly here. Then they would be located.
Yeah, I don't know if they're sized correctly. They look awfully large compared to the backyard area.
Yeah, no.
But
yeah,
that's the location. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Julian, can you put on take the picture down just so I can see who has any questions? Thank you. Is that Alderman Arnett? You have your hand up.
Yeah, I'd like to divide this into two different sections. It seems to me for the Environmental Matters Committee, we ought to be talking about any environmental impacts. And as far as I can tell, there's no new impervious surface area. So there's no new drainage issues. That doesn't mean that we might not want to ask for mitigation of any existing stormwater runoff, but it seems to me the province of this committee is strictly the environmental aspects of this. On the other side, and as a alderperson looking at this writ large, I have several difficulties. One is surplusing this and not through a competitive process, but also I've been told by a lawyer who no longer speaks to me, but that there is no such thing as landlocked property in the city. The property owner always has the right to egress through city property, just as a matter of right. And so I'm wondering if that is A, true, and B, if that isn't a solution. I mean, what I'm assuming, and it could be wrong, is that Mr. Evans, you want access to the back of your property, and it may well be access to the back of your property for parking. I think you just alluded that you're kind of moving cars around on the street and you want parking. Now, if you want to put parking there, then there might be impervious surface considerations. If you wanted to buy part of the city lot for your parking, that's a whole nother consideration. I question any city property going for a appraised value of $1. So that one narrow strip, that seems like a pretty one-way appraisal of the value. And I also, in looking at the financial impact statement, it looks like the appraised value is for 1 year of foregone city parking. Well, you know, we have parking every year. So it would seem to me like that value should be much more than for just 1 year for these two spaces. But then I understand, trying to be sympathetic as a representative of citizens, that could make this, you know, financially unacceptable. So I guess for the environmental matters, if there's no new impervious space, unless we're going to ask for some consideration to address some stormwater management, I'm not sure really what our issue is. From a legal side and a financial side, I really think there should be some exploration. And Mr. Evans, you said you're a real estate lawyer. Maybe you already know, but I think you already have a right to access through city property to your land. And so I'm wondering if you don't already have a solution without going through all of this. But I'll ask you that question.
Yeah, Mr. Evans, if you have information on that, and also can you clarify what you want to do with that property?
Thank you. Yes, Alderman Arnett, I am a real estate lawyer and I've been practicing for 20 years, but I don't know the answer to everything. I do know that there is a tenet of law that you cannot have a landlocked property. I think the issue is my property is not landlocked, right? I can access my property from the front. What we'd be talking about, at least what I've come across, is if you're in a landlocked property in the middle of a bunch of other parcels. So I don't know that I could do that. I guess I wouldn't do that because I'd rather work with the city. And I also forgot in all of this, the whole environmental part, and what I had sort of said is that this plan was developed by Mr. Maffei with the city. I'm happy to develop a pervious paver parking pad. I have my accreditation in LEED certification, LEED green building. So I have a great interest in that kind of stuff. And it might add an expense, but it could be pretty cool to do something back there that would also aid. I'm not an expert in design, but something that would also aid in stormwater management with the city lot, because that's all pervious and it's pretty large. You know, I do have some water infiltration issues in the basement here. I've got a sump pump that runs. So those kind of things could be addressed instead of being pumped into the storm drain out of my basement or wherever it goes. I bought it like that. You know, there could be, it's just an overgrown, we mow it all, the city doesn't, but it's sort of just a grass area, and we could do pervious. We could do something cool like a rain garden. I could plant some trees. It could actually be sort of a beautification. In some way, I'm happy to do that if that would get the project done, and I'm sort of interested in that kind of stuff as well.
I can just say for myself, that would make this much more appealing to me and much more germane to the province of this committee. Like you, I find that to be quite an appealing prospect. So I don't know how we advance the ball, but that would make me much more favorably inclined to this whole process and make me forget about some of my concerns as chair of the Finance Committee if we had that kind of environmental mitigation.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. The diagram that I'm looking at introduces about 650 square feet of impervious parking. Isn't that the case? There's 4 parking pads that will be added?
It does. I think it says, I had to look at this because I'm not an expert in parking lots. It does say down at the bottom, parking pad note, and it says it's to be dustless, all-weather gravel or stone. And I don't think that is a pervious surface based on my review after Alderperson Savage raised it, I think. So I looked at it. I'm like, that seems like that would be, pervious to me. But I think there's a pervious pavers. I looked at some of the city's code. There's other items that we could agree to be put there. So you're right. Right now, as that plan stands, I think would be impervious surface added, which we would have to address.
Anything else, Alderwoman?
Yeah, as far as a committee, do we have an attorney on the meeting? Because I'm a little confused on what are we looking, what are we here looking at? Just like my colleague Alderman Arnett, there's the financial part, and I assume the Finance Committee will be looking at that, or? Well,
I think I may have asked for it to come to Environmental Matters because of the stormwater part of it.
Because the finance is, I look at the parking. I live in Ward 1. I know the value of parking spaces, and 4 parking spaces is very extremely valuable. So I don't know if I am to speak to the finances. I'm trying to find what's best for the city, and I trust that our attorneys and our city manager feel that this is a fiscal level playing field, if you will. But from an environmental standpoint, I would want the pads to be addressed, now.
I think that's an important question, Alderwoman, about how do we, because personally, I think we need to keep in mind these are very small lots, and compared to some of the things we're having to look at, it's not like we're talking about a large entire lot or an acre or more. This is very tiny. So I try to keep that in perspective, but also I think keep in mind that I think we try to be cautious about any kind of impervious surface that we add, or I think we should be, just in light of our water quality issues and just death by 1,000 cuts. But I think we do need to keep overall perspective. And to Alderman Arnett, I also share your concern about any kind of sale of city property. In this case, I think that in this case, I don't think we'd have too much use, especially for the small strip that was appraised at $1. I think because it was such a small strip. The one behind Mr. Evans' property is larger. We might be able to, if we maintained ownership, we might be able to put some kind of stormwater facility on there. But if we'd have to also take into consideration any kind of drainage, flooding issues that like property owners have. And Mr. Evans said he has sump pumps, so that might not even make that area feasible. But so I guess my point is, I feel like you've offered, in my mind, a good compromise, and you sound. I'm glad to hear that you sound like you're very open to the green approaches and that are laid out in things like the LEED certification, and so I guess the question at this point would be, and maybe Mr. Jarrell could help us with this, or someone from the law office, but what we could do to kind of solidify the deal there. I don't know if it's something if we need to insert into this legislation. Because the question would also be like, what would be appropriate there? And again, if you're having basement issues, it's might not be the best place to have infiltration unless you could drain it off the property into the Larkin lot. But the Larkin lot, like you said, is all pavement currently. So I think ultimately, at some point we should have a plan to I'm guessing there's zero stormwater treatment on the Larkin lot. So at some point we may want to have a plan to retrofit that parking lot to put stormwater management, which could be anything from putting some rain gardens or bioretention or permeable pavers. But that would be a good opportunity to kind of tie into whatever you do on your property. And so, but that's way down the line. So I'm just wondering if what exactly could we put in the legislation, or if it's something we could write on. I know you wrote right on the plan that you parking pads to be pervious surface. And I don't know if that's something we might be able to just attach to the legislation and kind of accomplish it that way. I certainly, after hearing you, I do think we should pass this, but I do think it'd be helpful to have some kind of clarity. So with that, I don't know, before I call on Alderman Arnett, I don't know, City Manager Gerald, did you have any solution that we may be able to?
I think you should just do an amendment and just state that should be a term of the sales, and then let Mr. Evans, as an attorney, let him deal with our attorneys and figure out how that's done exactly. But I think that's a really important piece of this, and I'm glad that you all are moving forward with that.
Yeah, and it may, if it may be as simple as a rain garden on your property, but it also, perhaps another avenue would be to include some kind of willingness or agreement that you would work with the city when and if we get to a point where we can retrofit our own parking lot and make it more green and put some stormwater management on there. But thank you, for City Manager, for that. I think that's a great suggestion. And Alderman Arnett, you have your hand.
Yeah, I don't want to drag Mr. Evans into our bigger issues, but I really do feel that the appraisal undervalues this. But I want to bring us to the recently agreed to consent decree. Why is it that we can surplus these two spaces? And is the Larkin parking lot really providing value added? And in terms of available space for affordable housing, isn't this one of the things that we're supposed to be trying to think about now, is places where we can redevelop with affordable housing and at the same time take a stormwater management problem off the books, put housing in there, take care of Mr. Evans' access problem, get permeable space. And by the way, gravel and lawn become impervious even if they start to be pervious the more you park on it. So they're not really long-term in pervious spaces. I'm not interested in holding things up for Mr. Evans, but I do think that we've got to start taking a out-of-the-box, broader look at all of these issues. And unfortunately, I think that means there's some questions that before we close this loop, we really need to get answered by the city. I think, David, you're in the ideal situation overseeing all of the different departments that deal with this. But I think that, again, this could be an ideal place to take it from auto-centric parking to affordable housing-centric solutions that could also have built into them stormwater management, more pervious surface kinds of solutions. And I don't think that can be solved today, but I do think we ought to give some due diligence thought to that kind of a solution.
City Manager, did you have any response you wanted to say?
Yes. So as far as the HACA consent decree goes, they're looking at large parcels of land. So specifically, they're interested in Spa Road, when Public Works leaves and out of Waterworks Park. So it's so large, many acres of land to build housing, not because this is a fairly small parking lot, assuming that it would have to include the whole parking lot. And with the parking situation downtown, I just don't see that would be a really appealing area for redevelopment under those conditions.
Well, but if I could respond, how is it then we can surplus 2 parking spaces? I don't understand that. And surplus it for a total payment of $8,000, even though it'll generate much more than that if those spaces were filled over 20 years or 50 years, however long we're going to keep it as a parking lot.
Yeah, so all we're really surplusing is the very small strip of land and then the other, a little bit larger strip of land, which we're selling to him. The agreement is that he's then going to rent the other 2 parking spots. They're still going to be city parking spots, but they're going to be rented to him, I guess, forever and ever. And he has to continue paying for that as if it were, he has a monthly parking pass there. Mr. Evans, that's your agreement, right? That's my understanding of the agreement, is that you just keep renting those spots forever.
Mr. Evans?
I think, yes, thank you, Alderperson Savage. At whatever in perpetuity, as long as we wanted to be able to access the parking. And the yellow area is not generating any income for the city now. It's grass. It's just grass. Those are not parking spaces.
Can we see the photo again? I saw a narrow strip and then 2 tarmac or macadam surfaces what are the 2 green boxes then? I'm confused.
Those are the 2 spots that are currently city spots that are being removed or relocated, I guess it sounds like.
Those are 2 spaces in the Larkin Street lot that abut the grass area in the back of my property.
That's what
Those are 2 parking spaces. Currently, they're parking spaces. Yeah. These would just be blocked off. So I'd be paying for the spot, just like anybody else renting a spot in the Larkin Street lot. I'd have a designated spot so I could enter onto the back.
So the parking doesn't go away. It just becomes yours by this agreement.
That's correct.
I would have a license to use that spot.
All right.
Yes.
So you're going to be paying a lump sum
going away from the city.
Right. So you would be paying a one-time only lump sum amount and then an annual fee to park. Because that's not clear correct. From the financial impact statement to me. Maybe I'm just not understanding it. Well,
I agree with you. It wasn't clear.
Well, Alderman Tierney.
Thank you. As you can tell, I'm politically tone deaf because I should be your advocate.
I appreciate it.
The first thing I did when I got this was I went to the site, and the 2 existing lots are just like crap. Sorry, they're just I know it's grass and it's pervious, but it's just so. Obviously, I think this is an improvement in highest and best use. I'm assuming that we have done our financial due diligence and that the lease or the rent that we're getting for Larkin offsets in the amount we're getting. And so I would support it if you could elevate any of the stormwater improvements, because it is a crappy site. You're going to get I mean, I don't even know if you want gravel, because would it just run off? I mean, I don't know. I'm not, that's not my, I don't know what the best site improvement would be, or kind of pavement to use. But I think it's anything is better than what's there now, only because it can't be used. It just can't be. I hate to use the term landlocked, but it is, it's got a retaining wall on one, and it's just, so I fully support trying to elevate the stormwater drainage somehow, because that will just flood and the gravel will wash away, and then that will look like crud. So that's my professional expertise.
Well, I'm with you, Ellie. I think now that I more fully understand, or I hope what I'm understanding now is the financial agreement. There's a purchase and then a payment for the rent of the spaces. I'm comfortable with that on the financial side. And then I'm certainly comfortable with whatever language we can agree to with Mr. Evans about advancing the cause of the environment and stormwater management, however we do it. I mean, obviously, Mr. Evans, that's an additional expense to you. And gravel...
I'm well aware. Yes.
Yeah, I know. Gravel does compact and become impervious, so I don't think that's the right solution. I think you have to do the kinds of parking that was put down at the Eastport Yacht Club that does have some maintenance. You have to keep vacuuming sediment out of that and so forth. But and you also mentioned a storm garden, a rain garden. I find that also, but that would have to work with your sump pump issues, and maybe that would help you with that, or maybe it wouldn't. I don't know.
All right. So
Just one.
I have a question, Alderwoman Tierney, about your pictures that you sent. Is that grass sloping towards the building or towards the Larkin lot?
Show them.
Yes, to which one?
It's sloping towards my building. It slopes down from the Larkin lot towards my building.
Okay.
Does that entryway, do those stairways down must flood? Do you get flooded down there?
I can't see the picture, but yeah.
I mean, I'm just the existing, and it shows in the diagram where you have the entryway and the stairs going down at 115.
Yes, my office is right here by the stairs. I'm looking out at it, and it slopes down. But I don't know really how the water comes down and gets into the basement. I'm not really sure of how that happens, but it's coming. It's coming down, and that does slope.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
I don't want to spin our wheels too much on this. I mean, I know in terms of the grass, Alderwoman, to your point, I mean, that looks better grass than my lawn. And, I don't think we should necessarily be thinking it's okay just to get rid of some of the grass if there's no quote unquote use to it. Because that's what we're trying to put more grass down in the city dock is because it can be used. In this case, granted, it doesn't make sense to do anything like a pocket park here, but you could have
that's what
owners and tenants kind of enjoy it. But all that said, I want to also, I guess I do have a question. I know I'm trying to focus on the environment, but just a quick clarifying question on the parking. So the two lots, you'd be essentially swapping those two X lots for the two behind your building. But what about the building next door? Because are those lots going to be leased by that building owner or operated by the city?
115 will rent the spot on the left to access their two parking pads, and 113B would rent one spot to access our two parking pads.
The one thing I'm not quite clear on then is like SP Plus is telling you that they don't have any monthly passes left, but if there are no monthly passes left, how can we give two spots? We're essentially building 4 spots and giving 2 to you and 2 to the other property owner, which means a net loss of 2 for the monthly passes. I mean, I don't know, Alderwoman Tierney, did that come, or sorry, Mr. Evans, you want
to? If I could address that, I thought of that too. I don't think that the lot is completely sold out. I think there are spaces available, even though there's no monthly parking available, one. And the second alternative is Mr. Maffey has a spot that he rents. And I think that the deal was going to be that his spot would then be that designated spot. And I would, of course, have to give him a spot then if he gave up his spot. And I believe the building owner at 115 also rents a spot because they've been here so long. They got off the wait list or they got a spot when it was available.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Alderwoman Tierney, I do want to, this is your ward, so I do think we need to also hear definitely from you. But that's basically all. I think we should, go ahead and move forward with it. And in terms of the two ordinances, though, the one ordinance, to figure out which one, are you 113, Mr. Evans, or
113?
Yes, sir.
You're 113. Okay, so I think the 02220, I would suggest that we just move forward with that one because that's just that small strip, very small strip of city property. I don't think there's anything much we could do. Although that said, okay, never mind. Maybe we should just hold both property owners to the same standard. So if that's the case, and I'm going to find out what the committee thinks. If you agree, we could just ask that the law office work with Mr. Evans and the other property owner to see if they can draft some language they want to propose to the council. Is that acceptable to the committee?
That's certainly my sense. I'm not ready to vote yes today. I want to see this amendment. But I like the way it's going, and I like the way Mr. Evans is thinking. So, I'm much more disposed towards this now than I was coming into the meeting.
Alderman Maternity, does that work for you?
Well, I'm confused on what guidance, what are we asking them to do? Because I was just thinking about something that could be applied here. You know how you walk along West Street, and I think there's an auto dealership that abuts up with the concrete, and he introduced, rain garden, just a strip, and I mean that's stuff that could happen here. Just I'm speaking of the environment, two strips of a rain garden of some sort on each side. But I don't know if that's our job to tell him to design that or not.
Right. Yeah, I don't think it is either. And Mr. Evans, I think we're certainly want to hear your feedback. We don't want to micromanage, although I know this probably seems like it is what you want to do with your property. But if there's something that you feel like you could propose to still, I guess show that you're hearing some of our environmental concerns and anything you might be willing to commit to doing or looking at on those 2 or 4 lots. And I think, so what are your thoughts at this point, Mr. Evans?
I think since I am not a landscape architect or in that business, I would need an expert to come back and evaluate, I think, how that would work. If there is water coming, filter it. I think I need an expert to come in and look at the site.
Okay. So,
did you lose me?
We did for a little bit. We heard you say you were going to bring in an expert to look at the site.
Right. I think I would need an expert to come up with a plan.
And do we need clarification on Larkin, City Manager Jarrell, that the Larkin situation is in perpetuity or just for a certain amount of time?
We will check, but this has been in progress for like 5 years, and the agreement was always that they would lease 2 parking spots forever and ever. As long as they wanted access, and if they ever didn't want access, then they would revert back to the city. But I'll double check on that. And I also double check on how, with a full parking lot, how we're able to reserve the 2 spots. But the way this works is when you sell a certain number of monthly passes, and you have to keep space open for those monthly passes in case they show up. So that's why, in a lot of cases, Hillman Garage isn't completely full, because we have a certain number of monthly passes. And once it fills up to a point where we need to keep space for monthly passes, then those remain empty at times. So I'll double check on that and we'll report back.
Okay.
Is there any way we can recommend this with conditions, or are we going to ask for it to see it again?
That would be I think we need to see it again. I think we made a lot of progress in the scheme of 5 years in the making. One more round, I'm not sure is unreasonable, especially with this advance in terms of making improvements to the environment. And I think we should give Mr. Evans an opportunity to see whether or not that's something that is viable for him, either in terms of the use of the land or the cost of the improvement. But I just can say I'm much more disposed towards this than I was coming in. And I think that if we have either an amendment suggested now or an amendment suggested after we have opportunity for Law and Mr. Evans to mull this over one way or the other, I'm pretty sure I would vote in favor of this, but I'm not ready to vote for it without some change at this point.
Mr. Evans, if I make a suggestion, just as I'm thinking about this and looking at the photo, because I'm wary because I don't want to. This is again a small site, and I think we ultimately need to approve this. But I do think we'd like to try to find some kind of compromise and without overburdening you. But so I'm trying to think of alternatives and a way forward. If you do have somebody look at the site, I know stormwater might be a little tricky given everything and your foundation and existing conditions, but another approach might be, another reasonable compromise might be trying to find a way to add some canopy coverage. I don't know if there's space enough to work that in, maybe some smaller canopy trees, but that I think if you can't do as much infiltration, maybe you could do the trees, which will help. They'll soak up more water than the grass you have there anyway, so they might actually help you out more. Right. So, and I think might be a good trade-off.
I think that could be a comment. I like that.
So could we just say we recommend it subject to stormwater review and enhancement to offset the addition of the impervious property?
Well, let's hear from Mr. Evans. Is there, I'm guessing is there any kind of time sensitivity to this? Would you object to if we table this until the next meeting to get a little more clarity? Because it might even just require, once you get more information, we could put another whereas clause in here that simply states that you're willing to add a few certain types of trees or shrubs or something, right?
Rain garden.
Or yeah,
right.
As it could be a part of the rain garden or what have you. But is that something? Is there any time sensitivity on your end?
I've been working on this street for 10 years. I was renting on Cathedral before I bought this building last year, so okay. I've been dealing with parking. It's not time sensitive. No. Okay.
All right. Well, so I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I hope you're starting to see. So thank you for that. And also as an aside, thank you for your service on the Building Board of Appeals.
Right. So Mr. Chair, I would say if we do have a quick breakthrough, as you saw in an email today, I'm asking for a special meeting of Rules Committee on the Maritime Task Force. I'm more than willing, if we get a quick breakthrough and a quick solution. This can't be addressed until the first meeting in October, the legislative meeting. So I think there's time between that meeting, and if we can come up with a quick solution and have a special meeting of the environmental matters, I personally would be more than happy to do that. I'm not interested in dragging things out any longer. And like you, I feel we've made a major step forward in advancing the ball here. So I would offer that also. If things can happen quickly, we can try to accommodate.
I appreciate it.
And Alderwoman Tierney, this is your ward as well. So are you okay with that?
Yeah, I want to I hope Mr. Evans understands that, in the broad scheme of things, as the city of Annapolis, we have a small footprint, and every piece of land is basically, valuable and should be looked at for all sorts of things. And that's, why we are spending this time.
Of course.
So
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you again for working with us and hearing us out, Mr. Evans. Thank you so much for coming to the meeting. It's very helpful.
I was so happy to be invited. I appreciate it. May I ask one question?
Yes.
What would be the next step? Would the city attorney reach out to me, or what should I do?
Yeah, I'll ask the city attorney to one of the assistant city attorneys to reach out to you to put together that language for the amendment.
Okay. And then in the meantime, I'm going to contact a landscaping person who maybe specializes in environmental type things, and I'm sure I have contacts. So I'll start the ball rolling on that.
Okay. Great. Does anybody want to make a motion here to postpone till next meeting or next month?
So move.
Second.
And sooner if we
yes, or sooner. Yes, and we may need to do it sooner if we to get a couple other reports. So anyway, yes. All those in favor of postponing till our next meeting, whenever that may be, please say aye. Aye. All right. Well, thank you very much. And that's, do we have to do that for both 022
No.
and 21? Ms. Green, can we just have that apply to both of those?
Yes.
The postponement. And then we'll move on to, all right. So the next item on the agenda is R1720, Annual Statement of Performance Standards. And on this one, I've had some conversation with City Manager Gerald, and I think we might want to postpone this one because the city manager, I had suggested to the city manager that staff try to develop some some actual standards for a couple different environmental programs, the sediment control program, which is in Public Works, the stormwater program for development that's in Public Works, and forest conservation program that's in planning and zoning. And I think that was it. For me, I think that was all I suggested to him was to get some performance standards for those programs, since those departments are running them from those departments for inclusion in this. And so I think, city manager, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said that you sent that along to staff to work on. So I'm guessing you would probably suggest we postpone this as well.
That would be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay. And Alderman Arnett, and then Tierney, if you have anything.
So in the performance standards now, there are standards for the Office of Environmental Policies, some of which will stay with the deputy city manager and her staff, or his or her staff person. So I don't know what we do about reconstructing that portion of the work plans, but it seems to me that along with the things that you're suggesting, Alderman Savage, we also need to rework whatever is going to be in here for deputy city manager for resiliency and sustainability and everything else kind of thing, because some of the old duties for the office carry over to the deputy city manager. So we've got to figure out how that gets reformulated. And in a more generic sense, and I was going to suggest this to you, City Manager Gerald, I have legions of issues with a lot of these in terms of the overall construction. Some of them have to do by department that have to do with their measures. I note in transportation, one of their performance measures is that the farebox generate 20% of their revenues. Federal law says it has to generate 35. So how can we have in a work plan that they only generate 20? So I have marked up this whole document all over the place, and I know we've talked about getting together with Ms. Farrow to go through that, but I think it's starting to become urgent that we do that if we're going to be using this for our next budget process. There's a lot of cleanup to do, and I've certainly volunteered my time, however it works best, to work and I think other alderpersons need to think about this as well. But I personally believe this is a very important document and a very important step forward, and therefore very important to get it further developed. And so I do think that for the environmental aspects, I agree with Alderman Savage about within each of the departments, but also we have to reconstruct what was here for the Office of Environmental Policy. But I also think we have a lot of other work to do.
Alderwoman Tierney?
Yeah, thank you. To Alderman Arnett's point, my understanding of this is sort of a linear process where we this is outside of just environmental, but we have this package of all of these performance measures, and that they will respectively go through committee. And at the committee is our opportunity. I mean, I suspect the transportation will go to the transportation committee, and that is where the council members can make their comments, and then as a council as a whole will discuss and then approve. Is that correct?
I think you're correct. And Rules keeps having this on the agenda.
Oh, do you have them all?
Well, and then it's at the end. So Alderwoman Finlayson has promised for the next Rules Committee that this will be the first item on the agenda. And Rules does have a heavy lift on a lot of this. And we just haven't done our job. So we haven't helped Lynn out very much yet, but I think we need to do that because this is important work.
I think the other
City Manager.
I think the other important point is that these are not going to be cast in stone, right? They're going to be a work in progress. There's a lot of issues, and we recognize that they're not all sort of parallel. There's different things being measured. Some are input, some are output, some are outcomes. I personally prefer outcome-based performance measures, and they're certainly not all there yet. So I think there'll be an annual update. I like the way that the fire department has done it for years, and that's that they get together and review all their performance measures at the end of the year and update either the goals or the measures as a whole. I didn't do that so much in Public Works because we set on some that we were comfortable with and then developed all the data, and to start all over again is a lot of work if you do that, especially after you've collected data for 4 or 5 years on some of the measures. But I think that's a good model, the way fire does it, to revisit their performance measures each year. So we'll do that in each of the departments. Some may change, some may not, but we need to make them all at least more parallel to each other on what they're measuring and what the outcomes should look like.
All right, I'd like to give the final word to Alderwoman Tierney before we move on to.
Okay, I was curious though, and I know David and I spoke of this when I was concerned about the role of the new deputy and not having that person get caught up in the day-to-day. And so what is the path forward on this? Excuse the paper, I'm on the environmental committee and I print out on paper, but this is kind of tricky because you can pull out things that address policy, and then I guess some other line items you'll put in planning and zoning or DPW. I think that's exactly it. Yeah. So some of the things that are already in the performance plan for OEP will come over, but I think what's important is the things that Alderman Savage noticed, and that's that a lot of the departments don't have environmentally related performance measures right now, and they need to. So that will be part of the role of the deputy chief, is to make sure that the departments that need to have those environmentally related and resilience related performance measures do have them, and not just the sort of day-to-day grinding out the work that they do, every day, but they have some of those other measures that are really important. Yeah, that's great. It's like spreading out the fairy dust.
Sprinkling.
Thank you, City Manager, and to my colleagues. Are we good with, making a motion to postpone this? All right, I see that Arnett moved it.
So
you did.
Yeah.
Second.
All those in favor of postponing, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you, City Manager. And so the last, last item of general discussion is Ms. Hodo on the call in the meeting?
No, she's not on.
Okay. Is anybody from the Environmental Commission?
No.
Okay. So I guess we'll move right to, Mr. Gerald, you said the Public Works. Oh, yeah, there we go. I see. So the director, I invited the director to come speak about give an update on some of the stormwater, the MS4 program. I wanted to just get an update on how we're doing with meeting some of our restoration targets, what the timeline is here going out in the future regarding the GreenVest contract, because that's something we signed on 2 years ago now. I guess we started with the GreenVest, and this may be worthwhile to give a presentation to the entire council at some point, because I know at least I am getting a lot of questions about how we're doing with spending that money. So with that, Director Johnson, I'll give the floor to you.
My video is getting some problems. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Do you mind if I leave and try to come back? My video is frozen.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Meantime, I wanted to congratulate our chair and our city manager on the final successful negotiation of the deputy city manager. I'm looking forward to that. I think we'll have some exciting new developments and progress moving forward. So thank you to both of you.
Thank you.
Well, it was a difficult time to get it through, and you did.
Yeah.
So I'll have to tell Mark that I got that passed, but had to jump ship on his.
Don't say yeah.
So while we're waiting for Director Johnson, do you want a quick update on the resilience?
Yes,
authority?
please. I was about to say that. Thank you.
This will be about the fourth time that Alderman Arnett has heard this lately, so maybe he should just do it. But just kidding. So we're working closely with the county on this. The county formed a work group. Initially, it was just Jody and I, Director Dickinson, that were on the work group for the Resilience Authority. The work group has formed 3 subcommittees to work on the legislation and sort of the concept for this Resilience Authority. One is for the structure/organization of the authorities. So that's the subcommittee that I'm on. There's one looking at revenue / funding for these projects. Director Dickinson is on that. And then the third subcommittee is for projects. And so we ask Director Johnson to join the group and to be on that subcommittee. The subcommittee that I'm on is led by Chris Trumbauer. So they have that level of people at the county working on this. The goal is to have legislation ready to introduce to both the city council and to the county council either late December or early January. The reason why we're trying to push it through quickly like that is to show the state legislature who passed the enabling legislation that we're moving forward with this, because we told them it was an urgent issue, and now we want to show them that we're actually moving it forward. So there's a lot of work to do. A lot of work's being done. There's good people on the committee and the subcommittees and the work group, and each subcommittee is meeting about every other week, and the big work group is meeting once a month. So we've got a long ways to go to get that ready by the end of the year, but we're working on it.
And before I call on my colleagues, I guess, City Manager, what's the? Thank you for that update on the authority, and also, what about the deliverables coming out of the contract that we had with Mr. Neese and I forget the woman's
Joanne
name.
Thoreau.
Joanne, yeah.
Yeah. So it's good you mentioned them because they're also participating in the Resilience Authority. They're sort of acting, Joanne is sort of acting as a facilitator for all that, and Dan Neese is involved as well. So they gave us their deliverables when was it? And Dr. Nash, I see you're on it. When did we get those deliverables? I think it was before Teresa left, right? So we got those last fall.
That's right.
They were about, 85% solution. They still needed some work to clean them up. So Dr. Nash has been working on those and has a group that's formed up to help with that. And so I think we're getting relatively close. Is that right, Director Nash?
Whoops. Our thought was that we would keep going forward, but we would use the grant we got with the Department of Defense to really help flesh out some of the ideas. And we thought we could make it a much better plan. So we have it more or less finished what we were originally going to do, but we just saw a need for a lot more detail and that would really benefit us in the long run.
So can you remind me what the deliverable was for? What kind of a report?
The resiliency plan, it's really two parts. One is to help guide getting public input. One part is just identifying what assets the city has and what potential liabilities we have that are vulnerable to climate change.
Okay, yeah, because that was what I was hoping. What I'm hoping we'll get is, and I think what we need is, yes, identify the assets that are at risk throughout the entire city, hopefully, but also what kind of steps we need to take in the future. And if we don't get that from this report, I think we might need to do that separately. Because I have areas in my ward, and I know some of the previous studies have focused on ward the City Dock area and Eastport, and without really detailing exactly what we need to do. At least that's, I'm just thinking from the council's perspective, at least my perspective. I think we need to know as policymakers what exactly we need to be doing in the future, not just what's at risk, but what can we do about it. Maybe that's going to be step 2. Maybe that'll be a part of this. So anything else on that, or should I?
Yeah, and I think we'll probably get the priorities too, because that's the other piece that we need is, the list of assets, what needs to be done, and then what the priorities are, because then that's what will feed into the Resilience Authority as the priority needs for the funding that they'll be providing.
Mm-hmm. Right. We did look citywide, and we did take a stab at prioritizing them. Some of the priorities are obvious, but we had everything short term, so we had to move some things around to medium and long term.
Okay, and so you said, sorry, Alderman Terry, I'll get to you in a sec. So you said you think you might use the grant with the DoD to close this out. Any guess? Sometime next year? Early next year? Any idea? Any estimate? I'm not going to hold you to it, but I just want to get a ballpark.
Okay, I would say sometime next year, maybe next summer, something along those lines.
Okay. All right, Alderwoman Tierney.
Yeah, two things. One is a question. The second one is maybe a suggestion. But the initial resiliency report draft was an excellent report. Is that what is being finalized? Do you remember that? It was, I think, like almost 2 years ago. He wrote, when he first came on board, Dan Neese submitted a draft of a resiliency report.
I don't think you have seen what their report was.
Yeah, this didn't have any data. It was just basically the gist of what came out of that was that we needed a resiliency officer of some sort.
Right. That was just a proposal. Alderwoman, that assessment that he provided is just provided an overview of recommendations. Looking at it now.
Yeah. So that won't, I was going to say, we don't need to spend more time on that then, but.
And then what they provided as a report was not ready for prime time. It really was not ready. So we haven't been wanting to.
Now that we have a deputy city manager on this, what I think would be helpful is because of the questions that we're asking, and maybe for the benefit of all of us, is if we, not to give you more work, but now that we have a deputy city manager, at least could we have some milestones of what and when we're trying to accomplish? Would that be helpful to you? Or it would be helpful, I know, at least I think to me and to the council. Do my colleagues agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it'll be driven by the study that Dr. Nash was talking about. So we can certainly look at those milestones of that study and base it off of that.
Yeah.
Okay. So was that contract completely closed out?
Yes.
Was it paid in full? I mean, you're saying the deliverable was only 85% completed.
Yeah, but they've done a lot of other things. There are a lot of things associated with setting up the Resilience Authority, enabling legislation, a lot of other things. So I think we got value for what they got paid. They didn't get paid all that much.
Okay. Alderman Arnett, did you have your hand up? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, City Manager. Anything else from the committee then on that?
Oh,
doesn't sound like it. Okay. All right. Well, I guess we'll move on. Mr. Johnson, still don't see a video, but.
Yeah, so unfortunately,
I hear you at least.
I'm having technical difficulties with my camera, but I'm ready to proceed. I can proceed, even though
please do.
I can't be seen.
But if you had, did you say you had a presentation at all? Because you could send it to.
I didn't have a formal presentation. I was just some notes as I could sort of speak to what, the issues that were raised.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. So we have a monthly progress meeting with Greenvest, and our latest meeting was yesterday. It was held every Tuesday, the second Tuesday of the month. And during that meeting, the agenda covers the progress that has been made for items that they are responsible for pursuant to the MS4 permit that the city has. Now, the city's MS4 permit has 6 minimum control measures. The acronym is MCMs. And of those, Greenvest is responsible for 2 of them. That's the IDDE, which is the illicit discharge detection and elimination, and the post-construction stormwater management, MCM. The remaining 4, the public education outreach, public involvement and participation, construction site, stormwater runoff control, and pollution prevention, and good housekeeping, are divided between OEP and the engineering and maintenance groups of public works. So for MCM3, the illicit discharge detection and elimination, Greenvest began work in June of this year, and approximately they began work in the Spa Creek watershed, and they're about 75% complete with that. The mapping that has been done. They will complete the inventory of Spa Creek and perform IDD inspections. That should be done by the end of this month. So in probably 2 weeks or so, 2 or 3 weeks. So they're making good progress with that. Pursuant to that, we are looking at, as a department, as possibly developing an IDDE manual to sort of, help staff or consultants who we use to service the IDDE program to have a more formalized way of approaching it. But we're pretty pleased with the way that Greenvest has executed or delivered on that particular MCM. MCM 5, the post-construction stormwater management, They've done BMP inspections that are completed for this year. They did mailings, updated the BMP database, and the BMP is the best management practices. There could be ponds, you mentioned some of them, swales, bioswales, things, grain gardens, things of that nature. And the summary memo was complete. For the annual report to MDE, which is due at the end of October 31st, that's when it will be due. We are confident that we will be able to show progress on each of the 6 MCMs that are subsumed under the MS4 permit. And the 2019 report, as you're aware, was well received by the department, by MDE, and we're fully in compliance with the progress being made on that permit. Now, the goal is to, once we have 39 Hudson on board, we're beginning to look at the possibility of it having its own independent MS4 permit, an industrial permit. And the reason for that is that I feel that this is something that might be important for us to pursue, is that the discharges that come from an industrial facility like a maintenance yard are somewhat different from those that are covered in the general permit that the city has. So that would sort of allow us to sort of focus more on particularly things like housekeeping, which is very different from what is done for the city in general, as we operate equipment that could leak oil or lubricants or hydraulic fluids or salt, right? Salt is stored there. And, the housekeeping and the general SWIP, stormwater pollution prevention plans for that facility would be different from what is subsumed in the general or expected from the general permit. So that's something that we'd be working on. But in general, that's GreenVest's involvement with the MS4 permit. Before I move on, are there any questions on that?
Alderwoman Tierney?
I won't be humble here. What is IDP? That acronym?
I think you mean IDDE.
IDDE. It's illicit discharge detection and elimination. So the MS4 permit, which is an acronym, which is the storm sewer system that the city has. Since the stormwater is not treated, it doesn't go through a treatment. The effluent doesn't go through a treatment plant. There are prohibited discharges. For instance, if a restaurant were pouring cooking oil into the catch basin, for instance, as a cheap way of disposing of it, that would be an illicit discharge. That might be a fairly benign discharge. They could be more noxious discharges, such as if someone were to pour arsenic or some other kind of poison or toxin. So there are a series of prohibited discharges that the MDE's permit requires the city or the holder of the permit to prevent from being put into the program, into the MS4. And one way that since we have in the city 2,500 more or less inlets, clearly we could not exhaustively sort of police each inlet, but what we do have is a smaller number of outfalls. All of them eventually render down to a finite number, a fairly smaller subset of outfalls. And the IDDE program requires inspections for dry weather flows, which is indication that you do have someone doing something that they shouldn't be doing with your outfalls. And in addition, even if you have normal discharges, it makes some sense for you to do some inspections and rough testing as to whether or not if you saw soap coming out or paint or something smelling like VOCs coming out of your outfalls, you then would want to sort of trace that back to see what could be the source of that. And that way you sort of, by working backwards, you're able to sort of protect the water body the Chesapeake Bay that ultimately will flow to. So that's really, in a nutshell, what the IDDE program is.
Sounds like you've done a lot of mapping. And
yes, it works well when you if you have a good GIS, which we do, and by using the land use layers, you can then segment the city into priority zones. For instance, the discharges coming from a residential area would be less likely to have IDDE than if we had industrial areas or commercial areas. So by sort of using that way of a smart way of using the land use layers in the GIS, you can sort of prioritize your inspections. And then if you did get a hot reading, like if you did find something that was a problem, that layer is also useful for you to sort of trace, because the city is fairly large with a lot of residences, a lot of entry points, and it's a more efficient way to determine the putative culprit, right? Or hopefully the actual culprit who's polluting the water body.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. So were there any other questions on the GreenVest involvement with the MS4 effort or permit?
Yeah. What what you were going to present on?
I was going to move on to other things that they're working on for us.
Okay.
Okay. So can I do that?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. So the Back Creek design and permitting notice to proceed for that was just issued. It was issued on the 2 days ago on the 14th.
For which work?
Right. So we're sort of getting going with that. And they're beginning to ramp up their design and permitting. So, it's just started, but, I think that we are beginning to pick up momentum again with working on this. And, everyone is comfortable that, we're making good progress with this.
Which project was that, did you say?
That was the Back Creek design.
Okay, good.
Right, Back Creek design. I think that had been in advance, probably on account of the COVID crisis, or somehow there were a series of reasons, but that might have been one of the drivers that caused it to be advanced. And we're restarting that. And then looking ahead for the fiscal 21 proposal, we got a written scope for work that is proposed for next year, and that was received. We're sort of reviewing that. And we'll figure out, whether or not, the fee is appropriate, and, what the usual negotiations that go along with when you receive a proposal. But preliminarily, it looks pretty good. And, we're just doing our due diligence steps to make sure that, we have work in the pipeline for them to work on next year. And that's basically where we are with GreenVest involvement. Are there any questions on this or any other PW environmental matters that
yeah, just we have less than 10 minutes. Actually, no, exactly 10 minutes. Just to let you know. But thank you for the update. And so it sounds. And when was the GreenVest contract entered? And maybe the city manager recalls. I
believe it was in 2016, from what I saw. Just let me see if I have the date here. Pardon me. I should have had that. It was sometime in 2016. I don't have the exact date as we were speaking. I can get back to you with that date.
Yeah, I was just trying to just keep it in perspective. So you said they're responsible for the IDD, post-construction, stormwater management. And I guess I have a question, because it sounds like, is GreenVest primarily focusing on these larger restoration projects? Because I remember, and this predates you, Mr. Director Johnson, but you may be familiar with the report, but AECOM had put together a report identifying a bunch of our stormwater facilities throughout the city and possible retrofits, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm wondering if they are still going to be planning on retrofitting our facilities, or are they just focusing on primarily on these larger restoration projects?
I think that they can support us in terms of meeting the goals that we have for the permit. So I think that they do have the ability to. We do have the ability to use them as we see fit. And I think that one of the bigger ones was the Back Creek stream restoration that needed to be done. And the AECOM thing, I've started reading it. I mean, I think it sort of identified items that could be turned into CIP projects, and we would sort of use that as a roadmap to move forward with meeting the 20% goals that the permit has for us. And I see.
Yeah, just to kind of fill in the rest of that picture. So the first thing Greenvest did, because we gave them that list of the WIP projects when we issued the RFP. So they took a look at that, but we also encouraged them to look at other areas to get the best bang for the buck for our restoration money. So they took a look at all of those projects first, along with other opportunities in the city. And we've narrowed it down to, we can get all the credit that we need for this first permit by doing the Back Creek projects together with the piece that Underwood's going to do at SBCA. So that's our strategy now, is to address the Back Creek area. And then when we get future additional restoration requirements, when we get the new permit in a few years, then we'll look at Spot Creek and doing some of the projects there. But since Spot Creek Conservancy has done a lot of work along the Spot Creek watershed, it made more sense to focus over on the Back Creek side.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. And I guess just want to get 2 points out before we run out of time. And one is, there was some concern about the length of time for that it took for the city to approve the scope of work. And I hear you that some of that may be due to the pandemic and everything. And I just want to encourage the city manager and director to see if there are any processes that need to be improved to kind of improve that time, if it was due to other internal working out the kinks. I know this was a huge project, that kind of thing. If there was, just keep things moving along as quickly as we can for these projects. And the other question I have is, the big one's kind of, when do you think they're going to be getting started? You said the scope was finally approved. Do you know when they might? I guess they're moving forward with the next phase. Any kind of projected timeline yet?
I don't have that yet. Given that the notice to proceed was just issued 2 days ago, we would sort of be able to report back once we've a bit later on that. And I did have the contract date. It was October 23rd of 2018. I was 2 years.
Okay. The 16 date was when we first issued the RFP.
Okay.
And then it took a couple of years. And I hate to fill in the blanks here, but since I've been here a little bit longer than Mike, hopefully you understand why I have a little bit more knowledge of these. So what's going to happen is we've issued the NTP. They're going to do the design and permitting. That's going to take about a year to get the design and permitting done. It has to go through all the permit steps that are difficult for these projects. So we anticipate that about a year from now, they'll be ready to start construction on Back Creek.
Okay, excellent. And just last question. What was the project you alluded to for FY21? You said they have a proposal. Is that something you might be able to share at a future meeting?
We would share that in a future meeting. Be able to share that in a future meeting. We haven't finished our due diligence efforts on it, so it would be premature to mention.
Yeah, that's understandable. Alderwoman Tierney.
Yeah, just so you can let me know if this question's irrelevant, but when you start talking about the MS4 points and any exposure and obtaining them, just for my own knowledge, what is their fiscal year, and do they look at completions or intent or
they want a report. The MDE requires a report on the 31st of October of every year. So that is when all phase 2 municipalities have to have the reports in, their annual reports in by that date.
Oh,
so I don't think it's driven by a fiscal year in the sense that we use it, but it is their reporting year. That's when it ends. So we are on track to to provide a report by then, our second year of report by then.
So we have a 3-minute warning. Are there any final questions from the committee?
Where are you going for dinner?
We have to negotiate that still. Well, thank you. With that, I want to thank you, Director Johnson. Hopefully we will see you and hear from you in the future at the future meetings. We're sure to invite you back. And everyone else, City Manager, Director Nash, and Ms. Green, of course, and Mr. Jocks, thank you. So anything else from the committee before we adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
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 Okay. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow morning, David.